American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. As portions of the South and Northeast are working to recover from the historic storm that brought inches of snow and ice, officials are warning that a second wave may be on the way. Nate Foy in New York with the latest.
The Northeast is bracing for a possible second snowstorm. The warning comes just days after a massive winter storm impacted 230 million Americans. Extreme cold temperatures are responsible for at least 34 winter storm-related deaths in 14 states across the country. In Boston, the city received its 8th largest snowfall in recorded history, with more than 23 inches at Boston Logan Airport. Farther south, a handful of states from Texas to Kentucky are dealing with major power outages. Boston, New York, and Dallas have the most disrupted airports in the country, but Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says better days are coming soon.
President Trump kicking off his midterm campaign push in Iowa yesterday, reminding voters that losing control of Congress would derail his agenda.
If we lose the midterms, you'll lose so many of the things that we're talking about, so many of the assets that we're talking about, so many of the tax cuts that we're talking about, and it would lead to very bad things. We got to win the midterms.
President Trump says the administration will de-escalate in Minnesota after he had a conversation with Governor Tim Walz.
It couldn't have been a nicer conversation. And in fact, I said to my people, I said, it's hard to believe that's the same guy I watch on television, or I watch in a debate not doing so well, or because we had a very reasonable conversation, very good conversation. If you believe the conversation, he'd like to get this thing over with.
But Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry pushed back after his meeting with Board Czar Tom Homan, posting, quote, Minneapolis does not and will not enforce federal immigration laws. This as Democrats threaten another government shutdown over DHS funding. National Review senior writer Noah Rothman says Democrats are encouraging people to fight law enforcement.
We know there are activist groups that goad well-meaning liberals into putting themselves in between armed law enforcement agents and the targets of arrest. Extremely dangerous. But we've also seen Democratic politicians like Governor Walz tell them to continue doing that, not just filming them, which is their right, but also saying that'll be used in prosecutions against ICE agents. That's the sort of thing that can go to an impressionable head. Likewise, you have dozens of Democrats falsely accusing ICE of abducting children and using them as bait. Minnesota Senator Tina Smith calling that pure evil. Again, it's the sort of thing that radicalizes.
This week is National School Choice Week. Chris Woodward spoke to one organization that thinks there is a lot to celebrate.
Erica Donalds, chair of Education Opportunity at America First Policy Institute, said President Trump is the school choice president.
He ran on expanding school choice for families in the United States, and thanks to the One Big Beautiful Bill, the first ever federal tax credit scholarship was passed, which allows donors to get a dollar-for-dollar tax credit for their donations to organizations that turn around and use that money for private school tuition, tutoring, homeschool expenses, dual enrollment, and other special services so that families have education options and enrichment opportunities for their children.
School choice has its critics. A concern often used by opponents is that school choice undermines public education and leaves fewer resources for the most vulnerable students. Donald said that we have had a government monopoly in education for the last 100 years, and it has not served American families.
We know that only 1 in 3 students in America can read or do math on grade level. However, where there is school choice in the form of charter schools, for example, students are outperforming their district counterparts because you have that free market competition and accountability to parents who can move to a different school if they're not satisfied with their students' performance. So we need more free market Americanism, if you will, in the education space to give greater innovation, access, and accountability.
I'm Chris Woodward.
And Federal Reserve officials are expected to keep their short-term interest rate unchanged today after 3 cuts last year. More news online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
AFA Stream is a resource for life-changing instruction and information, a source of wholesome entertainment and relaxation, plus access to some of your favorite AFA shows. You can watch a lot of content for free, or you can become a Great Commission partner. Then you'll not only open the door to everything AFA Stream has to offer, you'll get benefits like a subscription to The Stand and some really nice exclusives. Why not get started today? It's easy. Visit stream.afa.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, January 28th, and it's only January. This month has been so long, and I've seen a lot of memes across social media saying, wait a minute, has this been like 17 weeks long in January? It is only January, but thankfully, that means that hopefully we can get a little bit more traction for conservatism before the midterms, but everybody is already talking about that, how this situation ongoing in Minneapolis is going to play into all of that. I still have my view that the Republicans and the establishment Republicans in particular really want to lose. They want to marginalize Trump and the MAGA movement and really just sideline that effort. And they don't care if Trump and Vance and Kristi Noem and everybody else is impeached for the next 2 years and nothing else gets done, because then they can say, haha, your candidates for 2028 are not going to be helpful, and they can then raise up whatever establishment hack Romney-esque that they would prefer. And meanwhile, Trump doesn't really seem to be doing a whole lot to reverse that kind of direction. Yesterday, when he was talking about guns and the NRA had to even put out a statement, Gavin Newsom this morning said he's lost to the NRA. I mean, some of these things are just... they're just easy losses. I mean, they're unforced errors that really don't need to happen, and yet here we are. So before I rant too much, let's bring on Steve Deace, who is the host of the Steve Deace Show and my favorite ranter of all time. And Steve, I know that you are just as frustrated as I am with the state of everything. So where are we headed, do you think, once we get past this month of January? And good morning.
Good morning. I think it is very possible that we are at an inflection point that will determine what we're talking about the rest of the year and the way that we are talking about it. I think that there's a game plan. You know, I always like to say, Jenna, that the enemy has a greatest hits album, and he just re-racks it. And sometimes it's folk music, and sometimes it's auto-tune, and sometimes it's a country song. To be honest, it's rarely a country song unless the Dixie Chicks are doing it. So, but it's just the stylistics are different, but the structure is the same. Okay, so follow me here for a second. All right, Minneapolis is a unique situation. We have a novel, unique coronavirus. Jacob Fry and Tim Walz are elevated to status where they are given the proxy speaking positions for the part of America that thinks Trump is literally Hitler, Fauci and Birx. If you don't leave Minneapolis, this blood will be on your hands. You just want grandma to die. Are you tracking with me here? Are you tracking with me yet? Okay. I mean, we even did the whole shut down the churches thing. They just did that like in the very first step, okay? With the All Saints Church 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, this is a game plan. Now, this is now where the reasonable Republicans, Mr. President, we have to do lockdowns. Again, I mean, you just have to accept reality here. And that's just, listen, we got to leave Minneapolis and cut and run. And, we don't really need to take on any more risk here. And so, I like to say all the time to my audience, Jenna, that worldview is destiny. The president's worldview is art of the deal. And there are moments, given how craven this era is, how unprincipled much of the right and much of America is, where that has been to his tremendous benefit as a politician and therefore our benefit as his constituents and as Americans. But the same thing happened in his first term, and we're at this juncture now where he is up against forces where there is no deal to be made. There's no deal to be made. And I think that at that point, you have to recognize the level of conviction that you are up against means that there's no deal, and the only D word here that applies is defeat. Someone will be defeated. It's a zero-sum game. There will not be a half measure, a half victory. You will walk away the winner, or they will. And I think he struggled mightily with this in his first term. It's why he was so successful in the foreign theater, because he recognized there's a lot of countries that wear the head garb and do the calls to prayer, but a lot of their leaders are more Arab than they are Muslim, and that they want access to our OnlyFans girls for their harems, and they want our amusement parks, and if we can, there are deals there that can be made. They're not nearly as principled as America's elites in the Bush and Obama Clinton years in our foreign policy infrastructure claimed. And I think that he knew this from his business dealings, and he's been remarkably, generationally successful on the foreign front. And he is greatly feared. He's made examples, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, Jenna. He's made examples out of people. He dropped Moabs on Assad. All right, he took out ISIS. He grabbed Maduro in the dead of night. Okay, he's made examples. So therefore, there are precedents set that everybody knows, like the carrier, the Lincoln that's heading to Iran as we speak. All right, everybody knows there in the foreign theater he will act if you push him too far. Okay. What's the scalp that we've claimed in the domestic side, Jenna? Who is it? What's the scalp that set an example? Who is it? Just give me a name.
On the domestic front?
Yeah, there isn't one.
There isn't one.
You can't give me a name. There isn't.
Yeah.
Tim Walz should have been arrested for fraud already. Okay. Especially the day after he announced he wasn't going to run, because now they can't politicize. Well, you're just going after him because of an election, like what they did with Trump the last couple of years. Well, now he's not running, so now it's just about the guy's a criminal. All right. Instead, he's calling Susie Wiles, taking phone calls, and getting audiences with the president, and essentially getting elevated as a legitimate statesman to be dealt with. And so, since there's no scalp on the domestic side, no one pawns do not count. Pawns don't count. All right. No one at the end of a chess match sits there and counts how many pawns they have. They count whether or not they checkmated the royalty. So there's no scalp on the domestic side. Everybody's gotten away with it. Nobody's been punished for anything. They got to take over 1,200 of our people and arrest them for January 6th. They got to take people like you and arrest and charge you. It's about 1,400 of our people in the last 4 years that they've arrested or charged, and there's zero on their end. So there's no scalp. There's no reason to fear him on the domestic side. He is. You can make deals once you've made an example, but we've made no examples. And I think that he just and I think the jury is still out. Tom Homan is still going to Minneapolis. Tom Homan is a serious warrior. I've met Tom Homan. I've discussed this with. I've had Tom Homan look me in the eye and tell me, "Listen, my family has to stay in hiding 24/7 because of all the death threats I've received." So Tom is well aware of what we are up against. I think it is possible some of what you're seeing in the Minneapolis front is with the you want to give Tom Homan a chance to get there, survey the landscape. Probably should have been deployed there from day one, frankly. And maybe you're buying yourself some time so this thing doesn't get completely George Floyd messy in the streets before Tom can take over, and then it's too late. The ship's left the stockyard. So I hope that's what's going on. But ultimately, without any form of a scalp, our enemies domestically they don't fear him at all. In fact, they're raising money off of him. They're elevating their own candidates off of him. They're energizing their own base off of him. And I think that's the reality on one side, and then the reality on the other side is absolutely the Republican establishment would rather lose these midterms. They would much rather be in the minority. You bet they would be 100%, because they're still going to raise. They're going to. This is how they think. I'm still going to go to you gullible conservatives the next couple of years and raise oodles of money off of you. Help me stop the liberal regime. Blah 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 blah. And you guys had your temporary Trump hissy fit. Now we're back in control. That's absolutely the way that they think. And so Trump is going to have to. He has not been willing to make examples at all in Republican primaries, except for people that are personally disloyal to him. And while many of those people are the worst kinds of Republicans, sometimes they're not. Sometimes the people that are loyal to him are very liberal Republicans, like Ellis, and now these establishment guys are realizing if I just fawn over Trump, I can just vote and betray his base all I want. Maybe he'll still endorse me. And so we're at the juncture now that we've come to the juncture that we did in his first term, which is we're out of deals to be made. This is now a worldview steel cage match, and you're going to have to show that you're willing to either suffer for what you believe or make your enemies suffer for their beliefs. And he was unwilling to do this in his first term. And so far, and I think the hope was, when they tried to put him in prison for 95 years, and that's after they stole an election from him. So they stole an election from him. They tried to put him in prison for 95 years, and then they tried to shoot him in the face. And the hope kind of was that at that point, this guy would actually get that he absolutely, and don't use the language that I'm anointed of God because of how uniquely evil this time is, and then not punch back. And I think the hope was that this time, this guy, when you get shot in the face, they try to put you in prison the rest of your life, and then they steal an election from you in broad daylight, that this might have been, oh boy, yeah, there's no deals to be made. And now pardon the expression, I'm a bat out of hell now. All right, now you've created the Incredible Hulk now. And what we're seeing right now, at least in terms of perception, is not that. And I think that he's going to have to pick one of these sides. Either you pick your own party in control of Congress, or you go after their people and punish them. But he's got to it's hard to do a two-front war, use Napoleon's axiom, hard to win a two-front war in any parlance. But he's got to fight one of these wars. He's got to he's got to force the Republican Party to move on his agenda, or he's got to punish the Democratic Party and make examples out of them so that they don't feel like they can just do a mob and act out and bring violence to the streets every time we try to do anything the American people want us to do. If he does not do that, his presidency will be essentially stillborn from this time forward. We will resoundingly lose the midterms, both chambers. It will just be impeachment palooza for the next 2 years. And you'll see people, again, start to break away and jockey for a position. He'll lose his leverage in 28. His endorsement will still be much coveted, but you're going to see a lot more people, be a lot more, like you start, listen, Steve Bannon is out there today accusing Trump of, quote, code switching on immigration, right? Steve Bannon went to, whatever you think of Steve Bannon, he went to prison for Trump. That is an example of what you will see if he does not pick one of these two fights and make an example out of either his own party's establishment or the Democratic Party, win them, and then win these midterms. That's what the next 2 years will look like.
Yeah, and Steve, I wholeheartedly agree with you on all of that. And to just kind of distill that epic rant into one word, worldview. And absolutely worldview matters. And this is why for the Christian, for someone who wants justice, understands how the government should work, and wants to see a leader who is willing to fight for what's right simply because it is just, that unfortunately has not been, and I don't think will be, Donald Trump. And this is why populism will never succeed over conservatism. Because I can tell you, when I worked for Trump, every decision practically, I mean, far and wide, he is looking at the polls. He's looking at whether it's popular, and he's also looking at exactly what you said, which is the art of the deal. What do I need? Where is the leverage? And what are my political interests? He's not concerned about what is the right thing. And we saw a lot of pitfalls in his first administration because that is his worldview. Rather than simply standing up and saying, we're going to open the economy. We're going to not tell people that they have to stay in their homes. We're not going to shut down churches. All of these. I'm not going to just take the tack that I'm going to sit back and say, well, let's let the states decide because I don't want the responsibility if this goes wrong and I lose my popularity. That's not actually a leader. He is in the world of New York real estate. Negotiation tactics may be a good thing, and that may get him far. But sometimes as a leader, negotiating isn't what you're called to do. It's simply calling to enforce justice. And that's not what we're seeing. And this is why the Democrats on the home front know that if they can simply maneuver and they can distract him and they can put him on the defensive, he will take that carrot every single time. And the establishment knows that if they just go to the parties and they go on TV and they praise him, then they'll earn his endorsement without actually having to work for it. And then they can just talk to him and say, well, we had to vote for this and this reason, because he'll say, oh, yeah, it was a negotiation. And so this is the bottom line here, Steve, is that I think that we as Christians need to be a lot more careful in recognizing when we have a leader who is grounded in truth and is willing to fight the fights that are right just because it's right and enact justice, a biblical justice on behalf of the civil government, versus a populist who is concerned about the polls and concerned about the negotiation and concerned about the tactics. Because if we have somebody who that line moves depending on the angle that he's working, we will never be assured that he's going to do the right thing in any given situation. And I think that's what we're seeing in his administration right now.
Well, I just don't think there's a Christian populist capable of what you're advocating, which is why I do the kind of show that I do. This is why a leader like Trump was basically necessary in many people's minds for this time. I mean, Trump represents the pinnacle of the current American, by and large, the current American evangelical worldview. This is the most that it is capable of. Is where we currently are. We skipped an entire generation of preaching, teaching, manhood, and so this idea that was never going to come due, that God was never going to make that bill be paid, and we're just such a special people and so uniquely providential that we're just going to just roll this over, 90 days, same as cash, and keep deferring the payments generation after generation. It's just simply not true. I mean, we are where we are because of who we are, and there is just, I'll just tell you, I host one of the largest programs in America by an American evangelical. That the amount of Americans, by God's grace, that talk to more evangelicals, the Bible people, on a daily basis than this kid right here, born to a 15-year-old mom who nearly got aborted. It's a small handful of people who do that who do that more than I do every single day. The worldview simply is just not there, and this is why we are going to need the appeal of the perceived strong man, and in many cases he has been that man. But we are now at the point again where what you're up against is a demonic horde. They do not want to share this country. They will not share this country. They want to conquer this country. These blue city states is what I call them. They're essentially, they're the new Confederacy. They are attempting to implement Jim Crow from the inside out and create no-go zones for the opposite belief system. They're the new Jim Crowers. It's just over a different slate of issues, but it's the same sort of philosophy. And this is going to take a level of commitment that, frankly, most Americans have. Trump has given his life, billions of dollars of his own businesses for his causes. He has, for all of his faults here, he has sacrificed way more for America than 97% of his voters have ever even considered. And that is the problem. We have an inverted paradigm. All right, you cannot expect more out of your leaders in a government by the consent of the governed than you yourself are willing to give. This is what made our revolution so unique. The men who signed the pledge that said lives, fortunes, and sacred honors weren't the plebes. They were the elites. They were the ones, they knew that this was going to be fought, that the war they were declaring, it was going to be on their land. It was going to be their plantations that were going to be raised. It was going to be their fields that were going to burn. That's what made it so unique, is the leadership came from the top down. Trump, for all of his faults, has demonstrated way more leadership than the average American has demonstrated citizenship. And so this is the problem.
100%.
And this is always why we were never going to get this much further with a political movement leading this and not the church. We have one transcendent institution that God has ever given mankind, and it is the church. And without the church, when churches get stormed as if they're in the heart, and they've been in the heart of Minneapolis this entire time. They've seen what's happened in this community. They've lived it. And when they get stormed, the reaction is the pastor does an interview with Don Lemon and just screams, "You should be ashamed." And men get up while their wives and children are fleeing and crying and hiding in stairwells and cornered. And the best they can say into a camera is, "I have no comment for you." No one acts. No one acts. Mm-hmm. So, I've got my differences with Trump for sure, but he's pushed the ball way further than most of the men of this era have even contemplated picking it up. And so we have come to the end of his worldview. I agree with you. That is true. But that's the problem.
The problem is that his worldview is the worldview of most Americans instead of a biblical worldview that would give rise to a leader, because we don't need a Christian populace. We need an actual Christian. And we need someone that will conserve truth, go fight the fights because they're right, and not just advance the ball as much as Trump has, but then fall really short of exercising the legitimate civil government powers that he's vested with, that our founders created so that we could establish a more perfect union, not just a populist consensus like a lot of other countries. And so, Steve, we gotta take a break here, but always appreciate it. Look forward to continuing the conversation soon. Follow Steve on X, of course, listen to his show, and we will be right back with more.
If you are 65 or older, you know this, inflation is hitting everyone hard right now, especially when it comes to healthcare. Over the last 10 years, healthcare costs have skyrocketed by, get this, 230%. If you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are still out-of-pocket expenses like deductibles and co-payments, and they really add up. But here's some good news. MediShare 65 Plus is designed to fill in those gaps and help protect you from rising healthcare costs. At only $99 per month up to age 75, you get peace of mind at a price you can afford. And MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around 30 years. It's not some big impersonal thing. It's a community of people helping each other, business owners, pastors, retirees. People love it. MediShare 65 Plus just makes sense. To learn more, give them a call. They're great to talk to. They'll offer to pray with you each time you call, too. Call now. 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, we've decided to make our Spiritual Heritage Tour this year a walking tour. So we're going to walk in Washington, D.C., and we're going to walk down to Williamsburg and then walk over to Jamestown, and then so we're going to do a lot of walking on this tour. So if that's something you're interested in, understand that I'm just kidding. I'm just pulling your leg. Hey, we're going to see Washington, D.C. We're going to see Mount Vernon. We're going to see Williamsburg, Jamestown, Yorktown, Boston, Mass. So much to see on our 3 different tours in 2026. If you want to go and not walk, but you want to get on a bus, join us for these tours. Any one of these tours you can find out information on just by going to wildmangroup.com. WILDMON group.com. All the information on all the tours for 2026 are there, and we hope to see you on one.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. There is atheist outrage in Lebanon, Virginia. There's a painting on a wall inside Honaker Elementary School. It features a giant orange tiger paw, along with the words Philippians 4:13. Now, that's the Bible verse that says we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is an atheist hate group based in Wisconsin. They get triggered by the name of Jesus. They say the message violates the law, noted that religion is a divisive force in public school, and they demanded the school district remove the Bible verse from the wall. Well, instead of telling the atheist to go to church, the school superintendent complied with their demands, writing a letter telling the atheist the Bible verse had been removed. They literally painted over the Bible verse. You know, it's a shame kids in Lebanon, Virginia have to check their Christian faith at the schoolhouse door, but atheists won't be satisfied until they completely eliminate our faith from the public marketplace. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, seeing the lack of oomph from the Justice Department, and one of those appointments, at least, I think Americans are very, very fed up with the DOJ and its current leader, Attorney General Pam Bondi. One of the things that they're complaining about is this headline: DOJ abandons request for Don Lemon arrest warrant over church raid, but it could still try to bring charges. Is from Mediaite. They say the Department of Justice has reportedly withdrawn its request for an arrest warrant for ex-CNN anchor Don Lemon in connection with a Minnesota church protest, but he may not be out of the woods yet. Prosecutors dropped the bid to charge Lemon and 4 others after a judge rejected criminal complaints for them for entering the city's church in St. Paul on January 19th while the service was ongoing. So let's welcome in Gerard Folletti, who is a senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. And Gerard, this seems to be like a judge is just dismissing this out of hand. Do you think that this was one of those judges rather, who is just looking at this from a political bias, or what's the situation as far as you know?
Well, when it comes to Don Lemon, I think the issue for a judge is they have this fear that if they rule the wrong way and issue an arrest warrant, they will be on the hook for violating the First Amendment in terms of his rights or purported rights as a so-called reporter. And I think that really it's a matter of a judge not wanting to take that risk. So this is something that still can be done by a grand jury. You can still be indicted. Don Lemon can still be indicted, and the government can still follow charges in that way. But I think the judge was basically doing an easy thing for him and trying to use the hook of Lemon being a so-called reporter in order to avoid actually signing the warrant.
So if a grand jury says otherwise, I mean, do you think that that'll be the DOJ's next move? And if they brought this in a federal court, in a district in Minnesota, or would they, bring this in a perhaps more friendly venue?
Well, they'd have to bring it in Minnesota. That's where this occurred ultimately. But I think that the DOJ pursuing a grand jury would answer a lot of the questions, perhaps, and obviate the political pressure that judges are feeling, because this would be a citizen panel, a panel of Don Lemon's peers, essentially, that thinks that there's enough cause for him to be charged. And here, ultimately, the question comes down to whether Lemon entered that church as a protester, or is intending or knowing that his actions would obstruct religious service, or whether he was merely along for the ride and looking to see what happened in his capacity as a self-styled reporter. So I think if a grand jury answers that he was really part of it, that his actions were obstructing the practice of religion, you will see that indictment.
And that's interesting. Where's the legal line between, someone who just has the pretext of being a reporter and saying, well, I know that these people are going to go in and they're going to obstruct religious services, and they're going to, go into this church or commit, some other kind of illegal activity, but I want to film them doing it. And then they say they're a reporter, but they're really, there to capture what's on video in order to for whatever reason, to push that out on social media, obviously get attention to it. If he knew that they're going in there, which he obviously did, and became a part of it, where is the line between participation and actual First Amendment cover?
And that's an excellent question. I think that's part of what we would see in this investigation and facts playing out is the extent of his knowledge, how involved he was in the planning or the preparations for this disruption, and whether he could even be called a conspirator or was merely someone who was there along for the ride. And I think the line really is when you're reporting from the sidelines. So look at what's going on with ICE actions or with any protests that you see. When you're reporting from the sidelines, that's more understood as a First Amendment protected function of a reporter. But when you're on the front lines, you're one of the people engaging with others as part of that protest, then it becomes murkier. You lose that protection. If you're the one who's hurling rocks at police, you can't just say, I'm a reporter, I'm watching what other people are doing. If you're the one who is blocking access to a religious service, then you can't just say, I'm observing what others are doing and reporting on it. You're part of the problem, and that makes you liable.
Interesting. And and so it's fascinating that a judge, based on the request that the DOJ submitted would favor the not even having the argument, because obviously if a judge signed off on it, Don Lemon could fight it. They could go to a lot of pre-trial types of motions and things. And so what did the decision for the judge turn on, and how would that actually be different if the DOJ submitted it to a jury, other than obviously regular individuals who sit on a grand jury aren't going to be as knowledgeable as a judge? But at the same time, it seems like this really comes down to fact finding, and perhaps the judge just gave Don Lemon too much cover here.
I think that you may be onto something, that maybe the judge did give Don Lemon too much cover. If you look at the other thing the magistrate judge did, is he crossed out the FACE Act charges and just let this go, let the arrests happen on a conspiracy against rights, on the Ku Klux Klan Act. And the FACE Act is very important. That's freedom of access to clinic entrances. That's an act that was passed to protect abortion centers from protests, but also added in that bill, thanks to Senator Orrin Hatch, was a provision to protect churches and synagogues and religious places from being disrupted. So the judge didn't really see this as an obstruction of religious service. The judge just saw this as a conspiracy against rights. So I think the problem is in part maybe the government didn't do enough to explain the underlying law, but I think the judge also got it completely wrong.
Well, and so are there any alternatives in the federal system, including, appealing that denial, or is the DOJ's only alternative to try to seek a grand jury indictment?
Well, you could theoretically go to the district judge, but the best course of action for the federal government, for the DOJ, is to seek a grand jury indictment, because that is something that is much stronger. And at that point, the government can say that they have presented evidence enough to show that they have probable cause of to make that arrest and to go forward with those charges. And that the government putting some of its cards on the table also plays well, because the public will have a better idea of what's going on. So really the strongest thing the DOJ can do to make this more bulletproof is to get that indictment from a grand jury.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of people, myself included, are sitting here kind of looking and saying, all right, this is something that is so terrible to go in and disrupt a church service. And we want to see accountability for this. And it does seem like, yet again, the DOJ and a lot of Trump's other, lawyers and appointees just really aren't doing a lot of their homework, and they're not necessarily getting some of these lawsuits in the best possible posture. And that's frustrating. So overall, how do you rate this current DOJ and Pam Bondi? I mean, I know across social media and obviously, the non-lawyers and lawyers, of course, we like to categorize people into lawyers and non-lawyers, and, that's fine. But it seems like the public perception overall, even among Trump's base, is that the DOJ is just not doing a great job.
Well, I think you can see there's plenty of reasons to say that the DOJ is not doing the job that a lot of people want it to be doing. But I think you also need to look at it the other way. In Minnesota, it's a state crime to disrupt the religious service. Where are the state charges? Where's the local prosecution? There isn't one. The states aren't doing anything at all to enforce the law. At least the DOJ stepped in here and tried to bring the charges, and they did successfully bring some of them. So I think we have to look at it in that. Not that I want to give too much grace to the Justice Department, but they are doing a lot more than we've seen the Justice Department do that's not politicized under other administrations. So I think that this is a step in the right direction, but it's not doing as much as we want it to be doing.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's going to be very interesting to see what the next steps are for the DOJ. And, hopefully Don Lemon knows that he's not out of the woods yet, and we'll see some accountability for him, as well as, obviously the other people that clearly aren't as well known, but were part of this obstruction of churches. And meanwhile, Gerard Folletti, my special guest this morning, I also want to ask you about the other lawsuit that was filed against President Trump by the families of the Trinidadian men killed in the U.S. airstrike. The headline from Fox News is that they're suing the Trump administration. And when announcing the strike last year, President Trump claimed that those killed were narco-terrorists. But the families of the two men killed in that military strike near Venezuela last October have filed a federal lawsuit against the Trump admin, saying the attack was, quote, manifestly unlawful. 6 of the men traveling from Venezuela to Trinidad who were killed in the strike have family members suing over the deaths of 2 of the victims, and they're alleging that their relatives were fishermen returning to from Venezuela to their home in Trinidad when the boat was attacked. So the families are suing for civil damages under federal maritime law. What do you think about this?
Well, it's interesting that they're bringing this case in the District of Massachusetts, which is much more liberal and much more against Trump and the administration. I also wonder what took them so long. I was expecting this political stunt much sooner, and that's what this is. This is more of a political stunt than a solid legal case. When you have something like this, courts should be and normally do defer to the executive, to the government, about national security determinations. So this case, in the strict sense, is not likely to go anywhere. If you look at what past decisions have been and how the courts defer to the government when it comes to military action. However, because this is Massachusetts and we have judges who hate Trump and the administration, this is going to go places. This is going to be heard and appealed and will make a lot of noise in the media.
Yeah. Wow. This is really interesting, and it just seems like the left and all of these people who can possibly allege anything against Donald Trump and the Trump admin get lawsuits together so quickly. Do you find that there is what appears to be sort of, whether it's a coordinated effort or whether it's, funding from, who knows where, but that these types of lawsuit, it just seems like these are so quickly filed against Trump when it's the opposite and it's the Biden admin. It's like, we're sometimes sitting there waiting to see, whether conservative groups will file anything at all.
The people on the left who bring these actions tend to be much more proactive. They have think tanks, they have nonprofits, they are well funded from outside, that all they do is sit around and contemplate the different things that they could do to interfere with the agenda of the Trump administration or any other conservative agenda. So when you have something like this incident, this narco-terrorists who were killed in an airstrike, they have a lawsuit ready to go. They have a plan ready to go. They have protests ready to go. We, on the conservative side, we don't have that. We're more reactive. When we see a problem, then we scramble to address it. But the left is very well funded, and they have think tanks that all they do is come up with ideas for lawsuits like this.
Yeah, and that you hit on the key point. It's funding, and we had thought perhaps Elon Musk would be kind of the George Soros of the right, and help fund some of these things. And it's really a shame that Doge didn't go as far or as further as it was supposed to. And, I'm not really sure that we're getting the same kind of output and engagement from Elon as conservatives, really hoped at the beginning of last year with Trump's inauguration. But, so much of the Soros funding is just everywhere and embedded in so many things, even on the state level. I mean, this isn't just sort of the top line, he's taken one target, the Trump administration and whoever, is the leader of the Republican Party. There's so much funding that just filters, throughout really every aspect of a lot of these issues. And it always seems like conservatives are doing the best that we can to sort of play catch up. How can we try to combat that with the limited resources that we have? I mean, I know that your organization, obviously the Lawfare Project, is doing a lot of that. And, we really appreciate it as conservatives, the fight that you guys are putting up as well.
Well, I think ultimately it is about keeping up the fight. It is about making sure that we litigate these issues whenever we see these problems, because we want to protect our rights. We want to preserve our democratic values. We want to preserve our country in the way our founders intended. We want to preserve a country where we can worship God and practice our religion freely and not have things imposed on us. So ultimately, it's incumbent on us to stand up for our rights, and that means in the courtroom, but that also means increasingly being aware of what's going on, being engaged at the local level. Even at the school board level, we see outside groups also funded by Soros and other far-left extremists who are giving lesson plans, who are indoctrinating our kids. So a lot of this is really awareness and being active and standing up for ourselves, making those objections, filing those lawsuits, and being loud in asserting our beliefs. Because if we don't, then if we stay the silent majority, the loud minority will trample all over our rights.
Yeah, absolutely. So well said. And before I let you go, Gerard Filitti, I also want to get your take on one last headline And this is good news for Trump, and coming from Fox News. The Trump admin wins court victory freeing ICE agents from Minnesota protest restrictions. So the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned a lower court ruling that blocked certain tactics against anti-ICE agitators in Minnesota. Ruling Monday that the restriction on tactics being used by ICE agents dealing with agitators in Minnesota would put a stay that prevented the officers from arresting, detaining, pepper spraying, or retaliating against protesters in Minneapolis without probable cause as ICE agitators, anti-ICE agitators continue to confront authorities carrying out enforcement operations. So, this seems to be like a good thing that they're not just, the court now isn't hamstringing ICE agents to have to sit there and take all of this this aggression before they step in and intervene. And it seems like had this been in place, perhaps Alex Preddy might not have, unfortunately been killed in that altercation.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. This was a very important ruling, not just for the Trump administration, but for the American people, because you do want that intermediate stage where law enforcement, where federalized, whether it's local or federal, can deploy strategies, can use tools other than lethal force. Because if all you have are the option of standing there and doing nothing or using your service weapon, that might lead to, and that does lead to, more tragic situations than if you use less lethal means to disperse a crowd for crowd control or to restrain someone. So I think this was a very correct decision that we should never have had that injunction in the first place.
Yeah, well, we got to take a break here. Gerard Folletti, senior counsel for the Lawfare Project, and, so many things going on in the headlines, and obviously to enforce justice in a civil society, to enforce the law, to continue to maintain order. All of these things takes a judiciary that is willing to apply the law to the facts and apply the law without prejudice toward any side. And, this is why these judicial appointments matter at every single level. It's not just the Supreme Court, it's every level throughout the federal judiciary, the federal bench especially, but also even on the state level. I mean, you should be familiar with how those appointments are made in your state, whether it's governor appointment, it's judicial merit selection, whatever the retainment process is, all of that, because these things matter. We will be right back with more.
American Family Radio is now available on iOS and Apple TV apps. That means even our content is in the world, but not of the world.
Here's where both of you, or each of you, got it right and wrong according to Scripture. That's always our plumb line.
And you can download these apps free from your favorite app store.
The objective is to make disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ.
AFR, available on iOS and Apple TV. And you can find even more app options at afr.net/apps. Washington Watch with Tony Perkins takes you behind the headlines and sound bites into conversations with leaders and newsmakers. And Washington Watch Weekend Edition features content from the best segments of the week. For many years, Washington Watch has provided in-depth news coverage and insightful analysis from a Christian perspective. And Washington Watch Weekend Edition is a condensed version of the week's coverage. Washington Watch Weekend Edition, now at 5:30 p.m. Central Saturdays on American Family Radio.
But evil men and imposters will proceed from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. After decades of global cooling to global warming to climate change alarmism, Larry Fink and the World Economic Forum folks have canceled the climate narrative. Fink now says data centers need massive amounts of stable power. They can't rely on intermittent and unstable energy sources like wind and solar. So in one moment, the entire climate crisis is canceled by the very folks that fomented it? Kind of suspect if you ask me. It's almost like the agenda had nothing to do with climate in the first place. It's almost like the true agenda was and is control.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
Hey everybody, it's Chad with the band Unspoken. I've seen firsthand how powerful it is when the church comes together, and that's exactly what Redeem Health Share is all about. With rising medical costs, Redeem offers a more affordable way to care for your family. Their flexible programs are designed to fit your budget without sacrificing your values. Each month, members contribute a share amount to help pay each other's medical bills, and you choose the providers and the treatments that are right for your family. It's not just about the money, it's about community. Redeem Health Share is rooted in biblical principles. So whether it's a routine visit or sudden emergency, there's a caring Christian community walking with you every step of the way. This time of the year is a great reminder to make choices that reflect our faith. So if you're looking for another way forward, one that reflects your faith, this is it. Call 844-REDEEM-0 today. Join the movement, share joyfully, and live redeemed.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, as we've been talking throughout this entire program, and we continue to talk about regularly, of course, worldview matters. And when you see some of these headlines, you have to think through, okay, what is the posture of the individual who is making the statement, or going into a church, or whatever it is that they're doing? Because worldview then will get you to a certain place logically if you follow that worldview that may or may not be biblical. And this is why we as Christians always need to go back and be grounded in firmly a biblical worldview that is focused on truth and ensure that everything that we think matches that truth. I mean, so often, even as Christians, we can have reactions emotionally that don't actually match reality that is truth-based. And often we can, also be thinking of certain situations wrongfully, and we always need to bring our thoughts under control and ensure that we are focused on truth. This is part of why we need to grow in the knowledge of the Lord, so that we make sure that everything that we are doing is not based on emotion. It's not based on, my faith is just in church on Sundays, but what I think in all these other subject matters, I can just do separate and apart from what the Word of God says. No, we need to have a comprehensive worldview, not this sort of charcuterie board of, just putting together, whatever we think onto this plate, and then it's not cohesive, right? We need to have a logical, comprehensive worldview that actually makes sense. And so this was one of these posts that is just wild. And I did a response video actually on my Instagram, and we are starting, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting a TikTok. I know, but I have been convinced to start a TikTok because I've had so many young people, including a few that go to my church, who've asked questions saying, I'm seeing this video or this statement out there, and I don't know how to respond to this I know it's wrong, but how do you respond to this from a biblical perspective? Or all my friends are saying this, and so we're going to go where the young people are and give them some tools and hopefully equip them. And so that's one of the projects that I'm doing here at AFA. So stay tuned for that. But you can also follow, of course, my personal X at Real Jenna Ellis. You can follow on Facebook as well, Jenna Ellis Media, and Instagram, Jenna Ellis Media. But we're doing some of these response videos, and some of what I went into on yesterday's program with the response to the post on Leviticus. That was one of the questions that I got from a friend's younger sister who was asking me and saying, I had scrolling, and all that I can see from even Christians is putting out this verse from Leviticus 19. What do I say to that, right? So we want to make sure to put out that content and make sure that we're doing more to reach people where they're at. Hopefully bring them to AFR, to hearing our shows and to hearing, the long form podcasts, the radio programs that turn into podcasts. But before they even sometimes know that we're here every day on radio, they are already on those platforms. So we're going to meet them where they're at with truth and with a biblical worldview. So I'm really excited for that. And so if you have kids or grandkids or, friends of your kids and grandkids that they have some of these questions, please send us ideas and suggestions, Jenna@afr.net, so that we can put out some of these videos responding. This is one of the reasons that I'm just so sad that we lost Charlie Kirk's voice, because he was prolific with going onto college campuses and just simply being there and saying, hey, let's have a conversation, let's talk. And I know that he changed hearts and minds and convinced people to at least recognize where their worldview then butts up against or confronts reality. And in that moment, when you're brought to the end of your worldview, then you have to make a decision. Am I going to admit that my worldview is wrong and actually come into in line with reality and truth? Or am I going to reject truth and buy into a lie and be willing to embrace a false narrative, something that I know is false, and reject truth? I mean, that's the tension point of worldview that Francis Schaeffer prolifically talks about in his works, that a lot of apologists do. So this was one that I saw as well. There were a couple, and I don't know that we'll have time in the next 5 minutes to get to them, but this was one that Libs of TikTok posted. Meet Eric Martindale, a registered Florida nurse. He posted this allegedly on his social media. She shows a screenshot. Now there's a concern maybe that his account was hacked, but isn't that always what people, they don't want to pull it down themselves and admit they were wrong, so my account was hacked. So we'll see the truth of that. But it says, at least on this screenshot, I will not perform anesthesia for any surgeries or procedures for MAGA. It is my right, it is my ethical oath, and I stand behind my education. I own all of my businesses, and I can refuse anyone. So think about what that worldview implies. That he is unwilling, and obviously this seems to not be in like an emergency room context or, state funded and all of that. So there is some, right to decline business on some basis of a protected class. But this isn't, this isn't denying someone because you disagree with the procedure. I mean, this isn't something where a doctor is asserting their right of conscience to say, I'm not going to perform genital mutilation surgeries, I'm not going to perform abortions, some of those things. It's saying, I disagree with you politically, so therefore I'm not going to provide you medical services. I mean, the way that we get there to that not only is through, utter disdain and hatred, but it is a devaluing and dehumanization of people that disagree politically. And the way that you get there is by initially devaluing human life. And this is why the pro-life issue is at the fundamental foundation of every other issue. Because once you start categorizing people and their value and worth based on either their actual gender, right, their the color of their skin, any of these, their age, any of these immutable characteristics, or even their beliefs, whether, they're Jewish or not. We see a lot of the anti-Semitic stuff going around right now. Then when you start dehumanizing them, it's fine to disagree with people politically, but when you dehumanize them, then you get to this point that you're willing to say, okay, we don't care even about life in the womb. So, and we don't care about, life of a lot of elderly who we're going to say this is fine for physician-assisted suicide, completed life bills, or, we have the power of life and death in our own hands instead of trusting the Lord who numbers our days, right? Then we can get so far off into that false worldview that you get like this registered nurse who's suggesting that just because he disagrees with MAGA, he's not going to perform medical services. I mean, this is dehumanization. And this is why if we have the biblical, truthful perspective that all human beings are made in the image of God, have inherent dignity and worth and value, then we will love them and we will give them the same services and treatment as we would anybody else, because we know that God loves every single human being and wants them to come into a saving knowledge of Him. You see the difference? And we need to be so focused on the Word of God and truth that we can answer all of these from a worldview perspective. All right, as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.